Assignment 04B, the Reservoir Monitor, is another assessment project in which we're going to use loops, and we're going to have the user provide a size of a tank or reservoir, how many gallons, what the current level is, how much water is in that tank, and then the input of gallons per minute and the outlet of gallons per minute. They'll click the button, calculate time to fill, and see how long it will take, how many minutes it will take to fill that tank, given that input and output and current fill. I provide you some sample data that you can use for testing, and also provide the image of the reservoir for you in Canvas. I'd like you to try this on your own. If you struggle, come back and watch the rest of this video, in which I will show you my solution both with storyboards and using the newer SwiftUI. Here's the storyboard solution for the Reservoir Monitor. I named mine 04B Tank Fill, and I've set this up for landscape orientation, both left and right, for iPhone and iPad. If we look at our storyboard, rotated the storyboard and designed for that. So we have here a label with our title set to 33 bold. I have my image. Now in the assets, I brought in that tank image for all three resolutions and named it tank. So here in the assets for the image control, I chose tank from the drop down for the image. To the right of that, I have a label, reservoir size in gallons, and then a text field. I put a default value of 1,000 in there, set the background to yellow, and right aligned it since it's numeric. And I basically copy and pasted that and created the labels for the current fill and the text view, the inlet in the text view, and the outlet and the text view. Next, I have a button with a title of Calculate Time to Fill. I gave it a gray background. And then I have another label down here that I put the default value of Enter Values and click Calculate. And I set that to System Bold 20. Notice it stretches out across. I've got it right aligned right now. You could, if you wanted, you can make that center. And that's going to be for our output. I'm going to hide my right panel, and let's hide the left panel, the navigator. Let's bring up our view controller. So I created outlets for the reservoir size, the current fill text, the inlet text, and the outlet text. You can name those however you like. And then I have an outlet for the label for our output. It's going to be minutes label. That's going to show how many minutes it takes to fill that tank. Again, you can just name it output if you like. And then I created an action for the calculate button. And I used an if-let structure here to check that those inputs are valid. And I did all four together. I made them all constants except for current fill. It's a variable. We're going to change that value as we go through our loop. So we have if-let reservoir size, if-var current fill. Notice there are commas separating these. If-let inlet rate and if-let outlet rate. So it's going to check all four of those. And then I have my structure here with the brackets. And inside that, if those are all valid, we're going to create a variable called minutes as an integer. It's going to be equal 0. If the outlet rate is greater than the inlet rate, then we're going to put in that minutes label the outlet rate is greater than inlet rate, and so the tank never fills. Otherwise, if the inlet is greater than the outlet, we're going to use a while loop and calculate that for each minute until the tank is full. And the current fill is plus equals of the inlet minus the outlet rate, and we'll keep adding the minutes to that as we go. Then we're going to output the reservoir we filled in, and I'll interpolate minutes in the word minutes. Otherwise, if any of these have an invalid value, they can't be converted to a double, then we're going to say minutes label.text equals invalid entry. Check your input values. Let's try this. So my iPhone 14 Pro emulator in landscape mode, we'll take the default values here. We should get 77 minutes, and we do. If, however, I were to take one of these values and leave it blank, we'd get an invalid entry. Check your input. Put another value in here. If I, again, maybe take this one and say ABC, Again, we're getting invalid. If I make this less than the output, let's say it's 3.5 gallons per minute coming in, while 4 is going out, we're going to get the outlet rate is greater than the inlet rate, and it never fills. So I want to continue just testing with that sample data that I gave you and make sure that everything is working each time. That's the storyboard version of this app. Let's take a look at the SwiftUI version. So here's the SwiftUI solution. Again, I'm looking at just landscape orientation. And in the assets, I added in the 3 resolutions of our tank image. Let's take a look at the content view. I'm going to go ahead and hide my navigator panel. And so here, if you look at our code, I created state variables for volume, current, inlet, and outlet, as well as the output. And the output will be the blue output at the bottom. The interfaces inside of VStack, we have our title Reservoir Monitor that I set to a .title font weight, gave it a leading alignment, and made it bold. Then I create an HStack for the center of the application. On the left-hand side is my image that I've set to tank from the assets, made it resizable, set the aspect ratio to fit, and scaled to fit. Then I have a vertical stack that's the right-hand side of that HStack, and it's going to contain 4 HStacks, one for each of our text that contains the label or instructions for the user, and then the text field input. So this first HStack here, we have our text reservoir size gallons and our text field that the placeholder is going to be tank size, and then I set the text to the volume variable that we created up above. Set the padding, the frame width, gave it a background view of kind of a light yellow. Set the multi-line to trailing. I want to have that on the right-hand side, and then set corner radius. Then I copied and pasted that HStack 3 times, and each time just changed the text. And here, actually, rather than tank size, this should probably say current fill. And this one, instead of tank size, should say inlet. Rate, and this one will say outlet rate. And again, I'm using the variables of current, inlet, and outlet for the text of those text fields. And then finally, I did the button with the text of calculate time to fill, and then my code here is going to be output equals calculate fill time. So I created a function for that we'll look at in just a minute. Gave it some padding, background color, foreground color, set the font, and added a spacer. Outside of that HStack, that very last entry in our outer VStack is going to be a text that we can use for output. And again, I don't necessarily need string output. I can just say output here. That's going to use the output variable. And it's going to do, I set the font to a .title weight, foreground color blue. I set the line limit to 2 in case it needs to wrap, and then gave it some padding. And then I set a padding to the entire VStack of 25. Here's my function to do the calculation. I'm going to use guard. And so I say guard, let reservoir size equals double volume, var current fill equals double of current, inlet is a double of inlet, and then let outlet rate equals double outlet. So the one I made a variable here is the current fill, so it's going to change. The others are constants. And then if those are not valid, we're going to return invalid data entry, check your inputs. Notice I'm returning a string, and that string is going to go into the value of output as part of our button code. Assuming those are all good, we're going to basically do the same thing we did in the storyboard version. We're going to have an integer variable of minutes. We're going to do an if the outlet rate is greater than the inlet rate, then we're going to say it never fills. Otherwise, we'll use a while loop and minute by minute calculate the new value of the current fill. When that's finally full, when reservoir size is greater than current fill, we're going to return the reservoir will be filled in interpolated number of minutes. We'll go ahead and run this in our emulator. So if I click the calculate time to fill, I get 77 minutes. If I put a blank data in current fill, it should give us an error, and it does. Go back to a valid input, 95 minutes for that. If the in rate is less than the fill rate, we're told the tank never fills. And again, if I put in bad data such as ABC, I'm also going to get invalid data input. Everything seems to work. That is our SwiftUI solution to the Reservoir Monitor project. If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the iOS app development cohort playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos that I create, you can click my picture up in the top right and subscribe to the channel.